Well, our little sport dory is complete at this point. It's varnished, it's painted, the interior is oiled, it's 100% complete. I've put one seat in it. There's different options about the seats really where you might want to put them, so I didn't put any other seats in it at this point. I varnished the seat, and it came out of the planer. You can feel the annual rings, and it's very rough, and I did that on purpose. I varnished it just like that without sanding it, so that we have a little bit of a non-skid kind of a surface to it, so you don't slide on it when you're rowing. And you know, there's a few other things that could be done, maybe something to put your feet against, but I'm not going to do that right away. I'm actually in favor of tying a little line onto the seat riser that you just put around the bottom of your feet, and that works fine. You know, that just works fine. So I don't want to have anything in the bottom of the boat, like I had said about bailing it and different things like that. But you know, we're just as anxious to see this boat in the water as you are. We know you're anxious about it, and you know, it comes out in the comments. But like I said, we're just as anxious as you are. But we've got it done, and I promise you that our next video, after the one that we're going to post this week, is going to be rowing this little dory, and we're going to row it in some flat water, and we're going to row it in some lumpy water. And, you know, I'm not concerned about that at all. I know how well these boats are, how seaworthy they are, and I know that the boat's going to row really nicely. It'll be fine, you know, and it's going to be fun. So we'll all get to see it, and it's just going to be a great time. I think it's just going to be a great time. So we'll have a drone overhead and some cameras from shore or a boat following us or something along those lines. And we're going to make as good a production out of it as we can make. So look forward to that and stay with us. The other thing I'd like you to do is check out our Patreon page, because we do have a Patreon page up at this point, and we've been getting some monthly patrons, and it's fantastic. So that'd be a great way to support us, is to check out our Patreon page, and if you feel so inclined as to help support it, any amount is fine with us. So that's what we're going to do next week. This week, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little box opening. I'm going to show you how I set up my little Ryobi electric plane, and I'm going to compare it to a brand new one. Now, Ryobi has sent us this planer. They sent it to us quite some time ago, and they asked us to do a box opening of it, because I think they realized that I use a Ryobi planer. And I use one for some specific purposes. I've used every kind of planer, and I finally settled on a Ryobi. Now, some people think that it's kind of like a light-duty tool, and, you know, maybe they conceived it that way, but I don't use it that way. I use it in some pretty heavy-duty situations, really, and I use it in some situations that no other planer that I've been able to buy will perform well. So what I'm going to do is show you all the things that I know about this Ryobi planer, and I'm going to show you what I did to it in order to get it to perform well for me. Now, obviously, there's a brand new Ryobi planer right there, and there's a number of different things about it that I'm going to change. One of the first things that I'm going to do is take this little lock and screw out right here that locks the depth gauge. Now, I don't use a depth gauge for anything, so I don't need the lock and screw, and I don't want it to be there, so I've gotten rid of that. The next thing I'm going to do is they provide this little wrench for you. I'm going to pull it out because I really have no use for that. It's made of such soft steel that when you try to tighten the arbor bolts up with it, it just bends the wrench. So what I've done is I'm just going to use my own wrench. This is just an 8mm open-end wrench to replace that. So I'm not going to carry this on board. That lightens it up a little bit more. We'll get rid of that. And now I'm going to turn it over, and it's got some plastic on the bottom of it here. I'm going to get rid of the plastic, because you don't need that on there. That's just to preserve it, I guess you might say. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, what they call a safety feature, out of it. This is what they call a kickstand, actually, but I don't like those. They just cause me all kinds of problems, especially when I'm going backwards. They just foul everything up. So what I'm going to do is unscrew the base, and I'm going to take that little kickstand right out of there. Now, the only thing that this little kickstand is for is so that when you stop planing and you want to set your plane down, it doesn't have the blades touching whatever you set it down on. But I'm not going to set it down on a cement block. I only set it down on a piece of wood, and I let the drum stop rotating before I set it down anyhow. So it doesn't have any use for me, so I'm going to eliminate that. And I'm going to take these 4 screws out of the base here, just take that out, and then put the base right back on again. And there it is. It dropped right out. I didn't even have to remove it. Now there's your little spring for your kickstand. There's the kickstand itself. And there's the rod that it pivots on right there. I don't have any use for any of those, so I'm going to throw those in the box right here. Let me rotate it around a little bit this way, because that way I can put the screws in with my right hand. It'd be a lot easier for me. So here's the fourth screw right here. And I'm going to tip the planer a little bit that way so they don't fall out. And then I'm going to use my right hand to drive the screws. Now, it's got to be careful you don't drive them in there too hard, because you could strip them, so be careful. Now, that's 4 screws. The base is back on. The kickstand is out of there. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show you here was that the blades are wider than the base. So I'm just going to put a little razor knife blade across there to show you that that blade is sticking out past the base like that. It's also sticking out past the base on this side. Same exact thing. You know, and it's funny, every planer on the market, the blades are wider than the base. I can't quite understand it, because when you're using the planer, if you tip it a little bit, it cuts a mean groove in your work. Awful. So what I have to do is take these blades out and actually shorten them up a little bit. I'm not really going to shorten the whole blade. What I'm going to do is grind the very corner of the blade off on an aluminum oxide bench grinder to a little bit of a taper on both sides. And the other thing I just want to say about these particular blades is they're double-sided, so you've got when you wear this side out, you just take the blade out and you flip it around and put it back in again, you get a brand new blade. Now this is what I call the in-feed table, and this is the out-feed table, same as a jointer. This is really like a little tiny jointer that you would use in a woodworking shop. That's basically what it is. That's how it was conceived. So, you know, what we've learned on a jointer over the years, you can apply to this. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is crank up the in-feed table so it's adjusted very deep. Now, the way to check the adjustment on the blades themselves, they relate to the outfeed table, same as on a joiner. I want them so that when I rotate the blade back out of the way like that, I'm going to set the rule on there across the outfeed table, and I'm going to rotate it around until that carbide blade touches the rule. And then I'm going to keep rotating, and it's supposed to drag the rule about 1/8 of an inch. Well, that one dragged about 1/4 of an inch. So that one's a little bit deep on that side, but now I'm going to check it on this side. So I've got the rule back on there again, and I'm going to rotate it around, and look at that. The blade doesn't touch the rule at all. So obviously the blades aren't adjusted properly. Let's try the next blade. I'll keep it on this side. That one just touches it, but it doesn't drag it. So that's adjusted a little light. And this side over here, that one's adjusted a little heavy. So same thing on the two sides. So what I'm going to have to do is readjust the blades before I try the machine. So what I'm going to do now is remove the blades and the pressure bar. And I've got an 8mm open end wrench here. And I'm going to loosen the pinch bolts up with that and just wind them right up in there as deep as they go into the pressure bar. They're not threaded into the aluminum, they're threaded into the pressure bar. So we're winding them in clockwise into the pressure bar, like so, and I can feel it kind of bottoming out in there. So that's about good enough like that. Now, you see, when I try to slide it out, it won't slide out. And the reason for that is because the adjustment screw is sticking down a little bit too much, and it's hanging up on the body of the planer right over in here. So I'm just going to back off the adjustment screws, and then hold this little doohickey down right here, and it slides right out just like that. Now the next thing to do is to just push the blades out of the pressure bar. Now you got to be real careful doing this, and I'm a little nervous, but I'm okay, because they're very, very, very sharp. Now I'm going to set that down and do the next one. Same thing. Just push it right out of there. Now I've got the two blades. I'm going to go over to my bench grinder. Now these are carbide blades, but you notice that they grind very easily. That's because I'm using an aluminum oxide wheel, and aluminum oxide cuts carbide very nicely. If I didn't have an aluminum oxide wheel, I'd try to cut it on a carborundum wheel. I know it wouldn't work out as well. So I'm just taking a very little bit off of each corner. I've got 8 corners to grind down here. You know, we've got that task done very, very easily and quickly. Now I'm going to head back over to my bench and to my planer. Now the next thing I want to do is just place this blade across the infeed table here, and I'm just going to pinch it down with one finger and show you that the cutting surface of the blade is shorter than the infeed table is wide, or the outfeed table. It has to be that way. Almost every planer that's sold, the blades are too wide. The Bosch is too wide. This one's too wide, every other one's too wide. And when you tip the planer a little tiny bit, it cuts this nasty groove in what you're doing. No good, you can't do it. You have to shorten the blades up. You can either grind them right off square at the end and shorten them up that way. I just taper them off like a little 30-degree angle like that, and it works just perfectly fine. Now I've got one of the blades back in a pressure bar, and even though I've cut the blade off on a 30-degree angle, in essence I've shortened it up a little bit, or the cutting surface of it up a little bit. What happens here now is that the pressure bar itself is hanging out into that 30-degree cut. I've already experienced putting it back together just like this, and what happens is the pressure bar then, if you tip the planer a little bit, the pressure bar cuts a groove in your work. So that's no good either. So what I'm going to do is take the whole unit back over to the bench grinder and just grind that little corner off the pressure bar. So neither one of those, the pressure bar nor the blade, can make a digger in my work when I tilt the planer. Now that I've got my pressure bars back together here with the blades in them, and I've done the grinding, I'm all set. And the next thing I want to do is make sure that the two pressure bars, the whole assembly here, weigh exactly the same, because they're on opposite sides of the arbor. If one of them weighed a lot more than the other, it would make the planer vibrate like crazy. And I've had that experience. The last planer that I used, I had to balance the two pieces, and I used pieces of hacksaw blade behind the pinch bolts. You could also grind the pressure bar in between the pinch bolts or do different other things, but you've got to get them to weigh exactly the same. So what I've done here is I've improvised a little scale here. Now, I've got a gallon can right here and a hacksaw blade and a little piece of wood, and I've got the blade hanging out past there, and it's like a spring, you see. So what I'm going to do is place the pressure bar on the end of this hacksaw blade like that, just like that. And then I'm going to pick up a rule and I'm going to measure it from the deck to the end of the hacksaw blade. And basically what I've got here is 8 inches exactly. So I'm going to take that one off. Make sure you don't disturb the blade any, because it will change the mechanical advantage. Put this on. And I'm going to pick up my rule, and I'm going to measure it. Now, I stop the shaking, and that one measures 8 inches exactly too. Now, if either one of those pressure bars and whole assemblies was any heavier than the other, it wouldn't read exactly the same. I'm going to show you. If I put on a small piece of hacksaw blade right on the corner there, and then pick up my rule again and measure it again, that's down to 7 7/8. So that has affected it by 1/8 of an inch. That's quite a bit. Now that I know that the two pressure bars weigh exactly the same, or very, very close, I'm going to remove that pressure bar from our little scale, and we're going to go over and install them back in our machine. Now I've got to get this little guard out of the way right here before I slide my unit in there. And it goes in quite easily, actually, just like that. It is in 3 pieces because the pressure bar is in 2 pieces and it kind of falls apart. So you have to be pretty careful that the blade is in the slot the way it belongs. And I'm just quickly going to tighten up one just to get it to sit still. Just like that. Just lightly tighten it up. Now I'm going to roll it around. And I'll pick up my other unit here and slip that in place. I'm just going to go in just a little bit. I'm going to push this bolt in a little bit deeper. There it goes. Now there's a little bar or a little plate on the very other end here that you just slide the pressure bar and the blade up against, like that. So it's in the right position that way. Now I'm going to tighten up one more of these little bolts like this. Now the next thing to do here is to adjust the height of the blades. And like I told you before, that these little Allen screws right here are what adjust the height of the blade. And these just tighten it up. So I'm going to take my rule and span across the bottom and adjust the height of the blades. So here we go. I'm going to take my rule and put it across the blade like so. And I've got 4 inches on the edge of my outfeed table, just like that. Now I'm going to rotate it around, and it does not touch the rule. Now I'm going to put it on the other side and line it up on the 1/8 inch mark like that and rotate it. And I can feel it just touching the rule, and it skids about 1/8 of an inch. It drags it about 1/8 of an inch. I'd say that side was just about right. So I'm going to tighten this side up a little bit more, like so. And I'm going to try this side again. Let's put the rule right back on there. Hold it down nice and tight and rotate it. I still don't have it. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to loosen up the center one that I originally tightened. And I'm going to tighten this one up a tiny bit. And I'm going to loosen this one up on this side right here. Now, when I turn it with the Allen wrench, it should go uphill pretty easily. You can see that it's in a slot that's tapered here. It's got like it's kind of tapered like this. So as you go uphill, it gets tighter, and you have to loosen the pinch bolts and tighten the height pins. So we've got it very close at this point, and I'm going to put this back on and rotate it one more time. Still not high enough. So I know what to do. You just put your Allen wrench in, crank it up a little bit more. Now we'll try it again. Just put it on there, just see if we got close. Oh, there you go. See, now I've made it a little bit too much even. But don't be surprised if I tighten down this pinch bolt that it'll lower it a little bit. The 2 of them actually, like that. Now I'm going to try it again. I'm going to take and put my 5-inch mark on the edge of the table, like so. And then I'm going to rotate it around. It grabs the rule, drags the rule about 1/8 of an inch, and stops right there. And that's exactly what you want. Now we're going to try the other side. I'm going to back it off, place the rule on there very carefully, 5 inches on the edge of the table. I rotate it around. It grabs the rule, drags it about 1/8 of an inch, and it stops right there. Now I fumbled it a little bit, so I'm going to try it again. I don't mind fumbling once in a while. I'll get my rule on there properly. It drags it about 1/8 of an inch. Done. That one's adjusted properly right there. Now the thing to do with this is just tighten it up. So there's the middle one tight, that one's tight, and that one's tight. Now they don't have to be awful tight. The blades cannot come out of there because of this angled aperture that they're in. So that's good enough right like that. All right, the next thing I'm going to do here is remove this little guard that I had to pull up to get the blades and the pressure bars in, because it's a safety guard of some sort. It's designed to keep your fingers, I suppose, out of your work. It sometimes gets in the way, and the last thing you'd ever want to do would be reach down and activate it with your finger and get your fingers that close to the blade. When you're operating the machine, you have no chance of getting your fingers in that blade, so it just seems unnecessary to me. I've taken it off of my other one, and I'm going to take it off of this one. So just simply unscrew that little screw, and there's more parts for the bag. Okay, we've got our blades in place and adjusted. There is one more thing I'd like to show you about this Ryobi planer, and that is that the infeed table, when you adjust it, it rises straight up and down like this. It's not on an inclined plane this way here. The ones that are on an inclined plane don't work real well for me, because when you turn the adjustment knob, it turns the table a little tiny bit. And when it does that, one corner will raise up and the other corner will lower down. So in effect, it's out of adjustment. Then you turn it the other way, and this corner will lower down, and that corner will raise up. So no matter which way you turn it, it's always out of adjustment. I just can't use it that way. It doesn't cut the same depth on both sides, and it's just not going to work really well, especially when you're trying to do something real like finish work with it. Because you can literally take a planer like this one right here, I can literally fair a hull with it right down to almost sanding. But if you have that inclined plane in there, you're going to get yourself in trouble on a real flare or fair or a real flat surface. So this one, like I said, it rises up straight up up and down, and it works great for me. Now the next thing I want to talk to you about is how this planer ejects, right? How well it ejects. Now, I like it. I bought it because it's got this round chute in it right here. And, you know, I know you can put a vacuum cleaner on the chute and all these different things. And the other thing that is about it is it's got this little flapper right here. This is designed so that when you flap it one way, it's supposed to eject out one side, and you flap it the other way, it's supposed to eject out the other side. Well, for some reason, the whole thing doesn't work. The flapper flaps great, but no air is coming out one side. So if I turn it on, you get a massive amount of air coming out of this side if it's flipped the right way. But when you flip it the other way, it'll hardly get any air coming out this side. So when you try to blow air out this side, it'll just jam up. Right? And when you're working on something and there's a lot of work to do, you don't want to just keep shutting your machine off and cleaning the throat out, or you have to keep it running and have a pencil with you or something and keep tickling the throat and all these kinds of things. No good. And every one of the other planers that I've got a line of Bosch planers over there, and I've had a bunch of other ones, and I just bought a brand new Festool planer, which I haven't tested yet, or I have tested it, but I haven't looked at it carefully. This planer right here is the one for me. Now, I've had to make quite a few alterations to the way it ejects in order to get it to work properly. But once I got that accomplished, it works fantastic. So let me give you a little demonstration about the air and the air pressure coming out of the two sides. You know, if I pick it up and turn it so that the flapper is flapped and it's covering this way and pull the trigger, pretty good air coming out of this side. Pretty good. Nothing special, but pretty good. If I flap it the other way, absolutely nothing. Nothing coming out of this side. So we know that it's just going to jam itself up right away. And that's exactly what it's going to do. Ultimately, what I'm going to do is, like I said, quite a few alterations to the throat of it. I'm going to cut the flapper out of it. You know, and I'm going to make it so that it ejects both ways. One of the things that's really important to me when I'm planing overhead, whether I'm under a hull and I'm planing scoffs in a plank like this, I want to make sure that it's ejecting out that way so it's not blowing in my face. I can't have it ejecting this way like a Makita planer. It just won't work out for me. You know, then if I turn it around and I'm planing the other way, you know, I want it to eject out that way. So it has to eject out both sides, and it has to eject really, really well, because I get involved with a lot of wet woods and cutting scoffs in wet wood, and basically like on a cedar hull or a mahogany hull, I'll cut a scoff even underwater, down below the waterline, and then what I'll do is I'll heat that up a little bit and dry it before I glue it. So, you know, I'm cutting scoffs, you know, below the waterline in wood that's wet, and the wet wood jams this planer right up. So this is the one I've been using. This is the one you've seen all along, and I've made all the alterations to it that I need to make. It works fantastic, and I want to show you what I've done to it. Let's first take a look at the new one. Now, you're looking down the throat, and you can see the flapper right here. The intended use for that is to direct the chips to go out this direction or out this direction. Well, it doesn't seem to work very well. There's not enough air coming out of the machine. One side has no air coming out of it, no matter which way you flip it, and the other side has a minimal amount of air. So something is holding up the air. I'm just going to temporarily remove the flapper and the switch so that you can get a good look at the throat. This is quite different than any of the other planers. It's got two slots in here. This is the slot right here that the chips come up when you're doing your planing, and this is the slot that the air comes up because it's got a fan. Now, the fan is to blow the air out of the throat as well as cool the motor. Well, it doesn't work very well as far as blowing the chips out at all. It might blow it out one side, like I said, but it won't blow it out the other side. There's something wrong with the aerodynamics in there, and I'm about to fix it up, and I'm about to show you what I did to mine that makes mine work so well. Okay, like that. All right, okay. Now on this one here, you can see that I've squared out the corners of the hole that the chips fly up in by just reaching in there with a chisel and just chewing at the corners of it a little bit. And the other thing I've done is the air slot is the same way. The air slot had a diagonal kind of a blockage on the end of it right here and one on the end of it on the other end over there. So I didn't like that and I squared those out. But when I went to run the machine, you know, it still didn't blow air out one side very well at all. So I took a piece of caulking tube, or a piece of plastic caulking cartridge actually, and I cut it so that it would fit in there, and I reduced the diameter of it. It's like a spring, and I put it in there so that it wouldn't block where the chips come up right here, but it blocks off half of the air slot. So the air is forced to come up on that side or that end of the tube. Now, when I put a plug in one side, it blows out the other side, and if I put the plug in this side, it blows out the other side, and it blows a tremendous amount of air out. It does not jam up any longer, you know, so it's very easy to use, and what I'm going to do now is give you a little demonstration. Okay, here we go with our brand new planer. Now I've got the flapper switch off to port, so it should be shooting out the starboard side here, and let's give it a try. I've got it adjusted so it's almost biting in 1/8 of an inch, and it's going to be throwing quite a few chips. Well, it worked pretty good, but let's put the flapper switch over to starboard, and the flapper will now be in there so that it's going to shoot out to port. Now, we've got it set pretty deep again, and like I said before, when I'm planing wet wood, it's a whole different story, but this is liable to jam up too. Let's try it out. That's it. It's jammed right up. Look at that. It's just full. Now you got the flapper in there. You can't even move the flapper switch. There's no way to tickle it out of there. You just can't seem to get it loose, but you don't want to keep stopping and doing all this stuff anyhow. So it's just a total inconvenience. And if you try to do it while it's running, it could be dangerous. So, you know, the thing to do is alter it from here, like the one I'm going to use and show you. And the other thing I'd like to say to you is the other one is going to blow the chips twice as far. So let's check it out. Now let's see how my old machine works. Now I've got it set pretty deep, just like I said. Absolutely no problem at all blowing out the starboard side. Now let's switch over to the port. Now, Now that little planer works perfectly. Really, really nice. This is really a simulation of cutting scarfs in planking, whether or not you were on the bench doing it or under a boat doing it or otherwise. Usually under a boat, when you're on a boat, the planking is wet. And when it's wet, it hangs it up way more. This one will work really well whether it's wet or not. The other one won't work at all. So, you know, you have to make these alterations to it, and when you do, you have just about one of the most useful tools that I have ever worked with, ever. I noticed that the guys down in Chile, all they used to build their entire boats was a chainsaw, an electric plane, and a drill. That's it. Nothing else in power tools or anything, and they get the job done, and they get it done right. So, you know, It's been a great day. I remember the first electric plane that I ever saw way back, probably in the 50s, in the early 50s, was a Skill 100 with a spiral blade in it. And they were pretty dangerous, and they didn't work as well as you might think, but that's all there was. And then there's another plane, a little Porter cable, I think it is, that I've got over there in a box, which was the most dangerous power tool that was ever produced. And I have it, and I'll show it to you, but don't ever use one in any situation whatsoever. So this is my Ryobi power planer. The other thing I'd like to show you really quickly on it is that I took a little piece of sink drain. This is like a little drain from a kitchen sink or even a bathroom sink, I guess. It's the right diameter, and it slips right over the ejection tube like that. And when I'm cutting angles like this, it allows me to be able to maintain the same angle as long as I keep this hand in the right spot. Trying to maintain that angle with a very small surface is a little shaky with a plane, electric plane, or a hand plane or otherwise. But with this thing on there, it makes it so that it's easier to maintain that angle. So, you know, I've got this on there a lot when I'm doing things. When I'm underneath the boat cutting scarfs, I can cut in the, going in that direction, I can cut going the other direction, I can cut coming from the grain down, I can cut from this end going up. It does not fail.